Imagine the profound grief of your husband being murdered, the most prolific American sniper in U.S. history, Taya Kyle, and then you and your family's story being made into a major Hollywood film. And as you try to grieve and go through sorrow, the world is scrutinizing you as you heal. This episode and interview with Taya Kyle was awe-inspiring for me, and I know it will be for you. She talks about what it was to go through that experience, what it is today, how she looks at the movie and how it's impacted her life. I know that you're gonna find a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration in this message. Check it out. Taya Kyle.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Life After podcast.
Thank you.
I've been really excited for this.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's been a long time knowing you and been a huge fan of yours, somebody that I just respect and admire deeply.
Thank you.
And I think that I want to start with who is Taya Kyle, right? Who is Taya Kyle? How, maybe early Taya Kyle? Were you a troublemaker?
You know what? I think it depends on who you ask, right? So the kids at school probably thought I was like too good. And then my parents thought I was like a troublemaker, you know? I'm like, that's the opposite. You want the kids at school to think you're kind of a troublemaker, you know?
We both grew up in Oregon.
We did. Yeah. Me around Portland, Eugene.
Not far.
No, and you know what? It was 70s. And so I was like a tomboy and my mom was all about it. Like, you know,
you just go out and play.
Yeah, just do and be whatever you want. I was like, no dresses, no, you know. And then I think I grew up with, I think the biggest part of my life, the difference between now and then, was I grew up as a young kid really feeling God and believing in Jesus. And then I just somewhere in my middle school years kind of didn't want to go to church anymore. And so I kind of had it, but I wasn't.
Was it something with your parents? You know, you're in our house, you're going to church. Like, was faith a big factor?
No, it's weird. My dad grew up Catholic, and then he met my mom, and she didn't grow up with the church in her family. And so she said, listen, I can't be Catholic, but we can do Episcopal. And so they raised us Episcopal.
Middle ground.
And middle ground. And then I think my mom wanted to sleep in too. So when I said I didn't want to go to church, she was like, that's fine. I'll sleep in too on the weekends. And then I just went to college and I kind of did my own thing and thought I would.
Always been really independent.
Independent was big for me, actually. It's a good word for it. I wanted something different. I wanted to get out of Oregon. I wanted to go anywhere, but be in Oregon and go out and like feel something different. And so I went to Wisconsin. And then I went to California. I know Wisconsin's so random, right?
Yeah. Where was that school in Wisconsin?
Yeah. I mean, really, I just kind of made an excuse to go there. It was like, somebody I used to date and was like, I want to be there. And it wasn't a good decision. I mean, it wasn't, but I'm glad I went to Wisconsin. It's just the reason I said I was going wasn't.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to make those decisions to realize that those weren't the best decisions so you can make better decisions.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, Dave, I knew going for that reason wasn't a good idea. But when I asked my parents, I want to go out of state, they were like, why? University of Oregon's great. Yeah. You got accepted. It's in state. Do that. So I really, and I mean, I don't like to say this because I don't like this decision, but I made something up. Basically, I was like, well, I really want to be with him. And I didn't. Yeah. But that
was the way.
Yeah, that was the way. And of course, my mom was all for it and go. I think she was a fan of his. So
yeah. What about Dad?
No,
not so much.
Yeah, not so much. And no offense, hopefully nobody knows who I'm talking about. But my dad had the discernment on that one. I remember saying, God, I trust you. And if you want me to be with somebody, you pick him then. And I don't care how old he is. I don't care what he does for a living. I don't care what he looks like. Just find me someone good, someone nice.
And this is when you're in San Diego?
This is when I'm in San Diego, Long Beach. I was living in Long Beach at the time. Yep.
And doing pharmaceutical sales?
Pharmaceutical sales, Yep.
Doing the independent thing.
Yeah. And then it was like a few weeks later, maybe a couple months, and I was in a bar in San Diego, and I met Chris, right? And I'm like, there's no way literally, I thought there was no way that was the answer to my prayer. He was hot, he was muscly, he was like handsome, he was kind, he was funny, he was such a gentleman. And I just thought like, this guy is fun. And I thought he was probably like 21, 22, I was probably 25. So I thought he was just young and fun, right? But he certainly wasn't the answer to my prayer. Because I'm like, if you ask for something healthy for your mom,
Yeah.
she would give me steamed broccoli,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
God wouldn't answer this way, much less the dude's a Navy SEAL.
Right, yeah, you're
and
right.
then you're like, whoa.
And a cowboy. Like, no way.
Those are the 1-2 of like, no, I know your type, right?
Yeah, like I'm like, well, that, and also I was like, I asked God for someone good and nice. In my mind, I was submitting and settling for, not an ice cream sundae, right? I thought I was going to get cooked broccoli, and I was settling that.
Yeah.
So that was my first surprise from God, was like, oh, you want our heart's desire, and you can do, like, we submit to you and you'll do something. I couldn't have dreamed up a guy like Chris. And I mean, really, like, kids loved him. Animals loved him. He loved animals. He would never hit a horse, but he could kill a man.
I heard just a presence, like, that could be felt, but in a way that wasn't a here I am, but a there you are.
Yes.
That made people just feel like the most important thing.
Yes. Kind, romantic. I mean, I remember at first he was saying, we were talking on the phone a lot, and he said, what is it you like about me? And I thought, what an interesting question to ask, And I said, well, I think I said a couple of things, and I said, you're sensitive. And he was like, wait, sensitive? And he literally said, you mean like I go around crying at movies and stuff? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
Spoken like a true cowboy.
Right, yeah. And I was like, no, I mean, you're like intuitive, you're empathetic, you're aware of energy and feelings, compassionate. And yet just a barrel of laughs, really. Like, we laughed all the time.
Well, and we'll obviously, again, for those that don't know, who Chris Kyle was, right?
Please,
of course, Chris being the most prolific American sniper in U.S. military history. 160 confirmed kills, right? I'm sure dozens more, right? And otherwise, but
many. Yeah.
He, again, and I want to talk about him writing American Sniper, the book, and what that was as far as, pressure and spotlight on him and things that he wasn't, necessarily asking for.
No.
Perhaps didn't want at all.
No, did not.
But it is beautiful, and we're going to talk about the movie certainly, but thinking about his sense of humor.
Yeah.
And the way that he made you laugh.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
I think that may be one thing in the movie that they definitely got right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of things that they got wrong, or,
Well, not too many. I mean, they really did. No, they really tried. I mean, I think especially because he had just passed, they went above and beyond to really make something that was as genuine and authentic as they possibly could.
Honor him.
Yeah. And I mean, they did, like, Chris.
And you.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, they had, like, Chris had a twinkle in his eye all the time. You can't put that in a war scene, I mean, and the things that people joke about in dark times, like emergency room doctors, most people be appalled at what they joke about, right? It's not that they don't care. But like his guys overseas,
they're just exposed to different stuff.
They were exposed to different things. They had different kind of humor and different kind of things that make them laugh. And
I feel like you could keep up with that, though.
oh my God,
I feel like you're one that's like, you're allowed a little dark humor.
Absolutely
like,
loved it.
I can't believe she said that.
Yes. Oh yeah. Shock value is like, one of my traits. Yeah. I loved it. And from the first night I met him, and then even the next day he called to make sure I was okay. Like next day call, I'm like, he just didn't have any, he had this bold confidence, and there was no self-protection, I guess, with him that I thought was so magnetic and compelling. I mean, I called him for the first time my aunt died. And so he had always called me, right? And then I called and I said, my aunt died. And he said, well, how do you feel about that? Which I thought was an interesting thing. Most people go, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But he's clarifying first, like, who knows how I felt about her?
And was genuinely asking.
Yeah. Like, how do you feel about it? Maybe I didn't care about her, or maybe I don't know. And so I thought that was really fascinating. Anyway, the next day he called and he said, man, the guys, after I got off the phone with you, I went on their beds and I jumped on them. I was like, Taya called, I told you. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, they were all saying, man, she's never going to call you. You're just chasing her. She's never. And I was like, who does that when you just meet someone, and he was at jump school, so I hadn't seen him.
Much less to his bros that are also SEALs and, these big alpha bravado guys.
Yes. And then share it with the girl that you're like, I told him, that to me was so just fun and exciting. And, he'd call me and just be like, I just called to tell you I'm madly in love with you. Yeah. And that's it, and I'd be like,
swoon.
I mean, just like, golly. And I mean, we were engaged in 6 months. I had to ask him, of course, but I just thought, like, the first time I told him I loved him, I was nervous because I wanted that independence still. Mm-hmm. And he had told me the night before, and I was laying there, I was rubbing his back, and he just said, I love you. And I went, And I like just kind of squeezed him and then just kept rubbing. I couldn't say it back because I was like, I had an anxious attachment. Like that's what I understand now.
Vulnerability, right? Like, no, red flag.
Yeah, right. Well, just, and just like, oh, I want this, but I can't. What if I, just the self-protection.
Yeah.
And so the next day he was about to leave and I was like, and drive back to San Diego because I was in Long Beach. And he was sitting on the side of the bed and I was like, I have to say this. It's not fair because I feel it. I just couldn't say it, but that's not fair to him. And him also, how cool that he didn't say anything like, hey, did you hear me? Or do you want to talk about this?
Yeah.
It was like, I put it out there and he's comfortable with whatever my reaction was like, God, who is this person? And so I pushed him back on the bed and I just like laid down like this and my ear was on his chest. And I said, I have something to tell you, but I don't want to say it again and I don't want to say it a lot. I'm just going to say it once. And I could hear his heart rate just start to go like this, which was so endearing too.
Yeah.
And
especially for a man that knows how to calm his heart, right?
Yes.
To be behind the scope, to be able to make shots
like
at the elite level.
Yeah, he's so confident he can do anything.
And yet you created that.
Oh, and he was just like,
That's
he goes,
special.
I said, I love you too. And he just squeezed me like a little kid, and he was just like, oh, and then I was like, okay. And he's like, I love you. And I said, I know, but we're not going to say it. Okay. Let's not say it a lot.
It was just once right now.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Once.
Just once. And then when I was walking him out and he was leaving, he's like, I love you. I love you. And I was like I love you too, but stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking through back to the movie.
Yeah.
True or false? Let's have some fun with it.
Okay. Let's do it.
You barfing.
True.
First night. That whole
him holding my hair back, all of it. Yeah.
What
Perfect. Walked me into my car and did it outside the car. I wasn't driving. My friend was.
You guys were together. 9/11 happens.
Yeah.
And obviously now war is going. Things are, and so that put an accelerator on you guys get married, rock and roll.
Yeah.
For you, how did you handle that whirlwind of the pace and for somebody that, again, like you just mentioned, we're kind of in your head, about like, I know what my heart's saying, but like, I need to temper that with this for the sake of protection or whatever. Like, did you sort of just throw caution to the wind? Was there moments of like, maybe this isn't right? Or was it just like, I'm all in? So
he was so right. Like, so,
it's made for you.
Yeah. Really, that's what I felt. I literally thought to myself, I have to marry him before I screw it up. And, that anxious attachment was like, you can't feel like this, or you're going to screw it up, or you're going to do something. And I was like, well, then I better lock it down because I know this is different. And I know this is so good.
Gosh, I love what you just said. To anyone out there, if you can say that, because I did. Yeah. I remember saying like, I can't live without this person, right? Like, I need to marry her now so that I don't screw it up. Like, very similar. I know that feeling. And I think a lot of people, like, again, it's all about pros and cons and over it. It's like, no, when you know that thing, like, just believe.
Just go, right? Mm-hmm. And he was in it. And I found it fascinating. I found out later, which it hurt my feelings, but I also kind of understood it. He was in an environment where nobody's marriage worked. Like it was 97% divorce rate and listed guys in the SEALs at the time.
Yeah.
And so he told me later, he said, well, I wasn't sure it was going to work. And I was it hurt my feelings. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'd never been more sure of anything. And he said, well, no, it was just, I was around people that the wives left or there was, they'd come home and she wasn't there. Yeah. And I said, but I told you, like, this is my life. I'm literally giving you my life. I remember specifically saying, I don't know if you realize how serious I am about these vows, And he was like, I do. I said, no, but I love you so, I remember, and
no, let me reiterate this.
Yeah. Like, do you understand what I'm feeling? I can't verbalize
How many other ways
this.
can I say this?
Yes. And I remember even where we were when I was talking about it. And, but I think, to his point was, I've got to give it a shot. Even if she leaves, like, we're going to try. And,
but how aware were you with all of that you just said around marriages and the teams and otherwise, that you were going to share them with the teams, right?
I did not think that. I did not think it was going to be like that at all, because I did, but he was so loving with me. And so, he would drive up to see me and then get 3 hours of sleep and drive back down to San Diego to go to work. And I've heard it described since, and it's true. It's like a mistress. And it's, she can call whenever she wants and he'll leave, right? She gets priority, even though you're the one doing the heavy lifting. He's passionate about her and he's tired when he comes home.
Yeah.
And it becomes like that. And then you want to support them in their passion. And you have this thing of like this, but it keeps taking you, not in a way, like people say, you knew what you were getting into when you got married, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, nobody knows what they're getting into when they get married. Nobody does. No. Second of all, you have no idea if they're going to be in combat or not. And nobody was supposed to be in combat as much as Chris was. He was in combat his entire time of serving, and they have rules against it. I got a call from an admiral later apologizing for it, like for what they did to him,
Well, I'm sure that's what helped change a lot of that, where the guys aren't,
Well, I hope so. Yeah. I mean, the rules were already in place. They just weren't really following them. Yeah. And so it was, what I didn't understand was that the toll that war would take, because he was so unchangeable, right? He was who he was, regardless of any trend, any style, anything. It was just, he was who he was. Nothing was going to change him. And I remember my dad saying, I only have one concern, because I said, do you have any concerns about me marrying him? He said, I just have one. And my dad retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, but never saw combat. And he said, war changes people. And I was like, oh, well, that doesn't even matter then, because he's like unchangeable kind of. And Chris and I kind of had a laugh about that before he died. Like, my dad said this, and he was like, yeah, boy, we didn't know, because it does. Yeah. And of course it does. Right? Of course it does. I mean, it's so naive, I think. Yeah. And also just, I felt like our bond was so good, and it was. I just didn't realize what we each would have to process while we were away. Yeah. How that would affect the dynamic when he was back. Yeah. I still didn't, even when he got out of the military, I still thought, he's out, we're going to be having a great time like we always do.
It's all good now.
Yeah, when he's on leave.
Just sync back up and...
Yeah, right?
And you have your routines and the things with the kids. Yes. And otherwise, plus he's compartmentalizing things.
Yes.
Or trying to keep you from some of what hell he's experienced, and not allow that to spew over. Yeah. And, all the while, he's a very strong dude, but not, he's human. Yep. Like, no matter how many lives you take or otherwise, and again, I in a football comparison, I remember like after a game, you don't really think about the tackles you made. It's about the ones you missed. Yep. And one of the things that struck me in Chris in interviews is talking about the guys that he couldn't save. Yeah. And those, everyone wants to talk about the kills, and he could care less. Yeah. And I thought that was just, again, humble in every way and incredibly powerful for someone who, to your point, had this unchangeable nature to them, but you still are, your experiences have a magnanimous effect on the way, especially emotionally, you relate. And for somebody that's, again, and I think in marriage too, the whole kind of, patriarch thing and this, like, I'm supposed to be tough. I'm not supposed to show this, and I think I'm hopeful that is changing and that pendulum's swinging a little bit, but there's still that good old boy, especially Chris being a cowboy and being somebody from Texas. Yeah. And what I loved about him though, is he did that sensitive part. The guys would call him to say, hey, can you meet me? Can we talk about something? Yeah. They trusted him. They knew he could say, he would be a safe place, and he wouldn't say anything to anybody else. And he would, like, literally in high school, there was a kid who was on the senior bench, and Chris was a senior, and the kid, I think, was like a freshman. And Chris walked around the corner, and the kid went, oh, crap, right? Because he's sitting on his bench. But he was crying, and Chris just sat down next to him, and he's like, I cry too, man. Yeah. Like, so he was all of those things. And that's, I think, what was so just incredible to me about him, is he had all of these parts. He was so gentle and good with the kids and playful. Yeah. And Andy held a high standard. Yeah. It was like this dichotomy of all of these things. I'm like, how do you be all of these things, right? And I think the trouble came mostly from us not having the tools that we needed for the service marriage. It's like, I knew civilian marriages and I could see that. Yeah. But where's the guidebook for this,
right? And it's hard for me. And I think, Dave, you and I talked before a little bit, about people that want to say that we weren't good together or we were getting separated. And I really was thinking, I thought about you with your gym. I thought if somebody said to you, Dave, you don't really care about those guys in your gym. Are you kidding me? It's all about you. You just want a platform, and you've never treated them well, and you're all about money. And wouldn't you just be like, you don't have, because I know you've cried with these guys, you sweat with these guys, you bleed with these guys. Like it would tear you up, you know, because it's something you cherish.
Yeah.
And I think that, it almost hesitates to say it because there's part of me that doesn't want to let people know they can get to me.
Well, I mean, your entire world was thrust onto the biggest possible stage through Hollywood, right? Like, this is the biggest, grossing military movie of all time.
Yep.
And, this guy named Bradley Cooper, right? Not a bad actor.
Yeah,
exactly. He played one Oscar for it, right? Like, these are the things that, I'm sure you could have never expected,
right?
Being put into a place now where people are going to make their assumptions. They're going to make their judgments.
Yeah.
They're going to, crucify you in public eye.
Yep.
And again, like the media does, right? They try to look for that little thread and they pull on it. I mean, background here, when I moved to Texas, it was August of 2013 and Chris was February of 2013. And so, I was living in California and I remember the memorial and every street shut down. I mean, I cried like it. I remember, and I didn't know Chris. I didn't know any real SEALs at that time.
Yeah.
But I moved here and Clint Bruce, who's an amazing friend of both of us.
Yeah.
I'm at his place and I asked him, I didn't know you at the time. And I said, tell me about Chris Kyle.
Yeah.
And he got this smile and he sat down and Clint's got that big old voice. And,
big bear.
Yeah. And he said, and he talked about you. I thought he was going to go to SEAL teams and the legend, right? Like who was the legend and what, tell me about these epic kills. Did he really shoot the guy through the scope and all these amazing things? Yeah. And he talked about you and Chris and how proud he was of the work that y'all had done and the place that you were in right before he passed.
Yeah.
That's what he spoke about. And I know he's a mentor to Chris and to you and a supporter. And so, I mean, before I even ever met you, that's the story that I heard and that I knew.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing it because it's such a tender thing to open your life. And Chris purposely wanted to put our difficulties out there because he wanted people to not feel alone. And I love that.
Well, I'm sure he was constantly and he certainly, you want to define hero, look it in the dictionary, there's a Chris Kyle picture. Yeah. That said, he wasn't ever going to claim that, right? And so he's thrust onto this stage where people make him not human anymore. And I'm sure that was a thing to, again, humanize him and who he really was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, he said the only reason he would do the book is so that other people wouldn't make him out to be something he wasn't.
Yeah, because the story's going to get told.
Yeah, right? That's what was happening is people were like going to tell the story. Yep. And so, and he said this way he could give credit to the other guys he served with. Yeah. And I mean, from the first day when we started talking about it with Jim DeFelice, who was the author, Chris was laying our stuff on the table and I was like, oh, we're going there? Like, okay. I mean, okay.
Do I get to create a final say in a couple of these chapters?
Right. But that was so healthy for me too. I mean, that was a really healthy environment for me to be in with him. His confidence and it doesn't matter what people think attitude. I needed that. Yeah. I really think that I grew a lot. And I've purposely raised my kids that way too, where you just have to know the truth. You have an audience of one, and that's God. Yeah. Nobody else understands your every thought, your every action, your every intention, only God. And so really, who can judge you but him?
Thinking back to dark times, there's Chris and what he's bringing home from combat. Yep. There's the dynamic of new babies and the relationship there. I know Chris was a remarkable, extraordinary father.
Yes.
But where were there times when there times when you were like, this ain't gonna work?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think
really?
I think more my frustration was when he would say, well, what are we going to do? Get divorced or something? And I would get so angry when he would say that.
The D word.
But yes, because I would think, and when I go back and once I learned that he thought maybe we wouldn't make it from the day we got married, then it makes sense. He's like, is this where you're going to leave? Is this where it's not going to work? And I'm thinking, I already told you I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm 2 feet in, baby.
Yeah. I'm like, if this is our house and the house burns down, I'm not running out. I'm burning down with the house, And so that's the times that I really feel like, I think, misunderstood. And some of that is generational trauma, which I know we can talk about, but it was very important to me to feel understood. And so that part of him would frustrate me to go, do you not see me and that I'm in this, and how much I love you too. Yeah. And I mean, I remember there were times where I'd be frustrated with him and I'd watch him like, one time in particular, we had an upstairs and I had a desk before it was our kids' room. And I was so frustrated with him. And I watched him walk across the street to the neighbors and I'm like, dang it. Like, I love that guy. Like, he's so hot and I love the way his stride was and everything.
But I want to kill him too.
But I was like, I can't. but yeah, I think there were times where there was one time in particular I remember crying in our bed upstairs, and he was downstairs, and he might have been playing a video game or something. Because we were just at an impasse. Like, I can't figure this out. And I remember crying and being so mad and thinking, if I didn't make this promise with you, God, like, I would not stay. But it really was the promise that I made to God, and I took that very seriously, that I would stay. And I remember crying deep, profound tears, where you're just like, you're so hurt, and I'm like, you're going to have to do it, because I don't know how to do this right now. Wow. And I read the books, I did the things, and then when Chris got out of the military, and I thought it was going to be great, and it wasn't, and I didn't know, which is why our foundation helps people who are out of service too, because I had no idea how big of an upset that is. He was drinking more, and I was confused, because I'm like, this is us now. Like, we're...
Yeah. We got out of all that.
Yes. Like, we're good. Yeah. And I mean, I was reading the books and doing the things to go, what is wrong? Let me find what the issue is. And he left for a weekend to think about whether or not we should stay together. And I remember thinking, what is there to consider here? I'm not clear on this. And now that I know more about trauma and responses, it's about feeling like you're not enough, or you can't do it right, or
he's failing.
Right? And it's feeling like you just need to escape the things that you can't make work, that you can escape. Because you can't escape the trauma. You can't escape the pain. You can't escape that you got out of things. The military indoctrinates people, and I understand that they have to. If you want somebody to die for you, you may have to indoctrinate them,
Yep. Well, the job you have to do, it demands
Right, it demands it. And so it was, if you leave, you quit on us. And there were guys that, after Chris died, were at my house in tears, because they went, I kind of bought it. And I didn't reach out to him the way I should have, that he left. And he knew that would be some of the guys. And they loved him.
Sure.
And he loved them, but he knew he wouldn't hear from him the same way.
Yeah.
And the ones that did show up wanted a piece of him, and whatever he had from the book.
Sure.
But he didn't know that at the time, but he was starting to get it. Right? And he was working in a civilian company where they wanted to parade him around.
Wow.
And he learned they were taking advantage of him. Yeah. And he felt like, I'm not a sucker. Like, I'm not a punk. Like, I can do all that. And it was so confusing to him. Yeah. And so if he couldn't change any of those things, maybe he could get out of this one place. And he came back from the weekend, and I remember just saying, like, I'm still in. This isn't an option for me. And I told him, I think it was like the love and feeding of a husband, or the love and care of, or how to love and feed, something like that. A funny name. And I opened it, and I was like, I showed him all the places I was highlighting. I said, I can see things that I can do to make this better. Yeah. And he said, you're in? And I was like, I'm here. And he was like, okay. And it was like a turning point. But we had those moments. And then with the American Sniper, I don't know if I've ever talked about this with anyone really, but for me, I have deep hurt that I didn't understand this part more. But when the book became big, I thought she was the next mistress, right?
That's where he could pour himself.
I felt threatened by it a little bit, because there are women out there who would sleep with anybody who's just because they're a SEAL, which I find so freaking weird. They call them frog hogs.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we know them in the NFL too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the NFL for sure, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of that.
Oh my gosh. So, and I thought, okay, we're out of that, and we're into our normal kind of life in our small town with kids and soccer games. Yeah. And then this book where he'd have to travel, and there'd be women that would, again, and it's not, I want to be honest, I think it's not that I didn't trust him. I thought, I don't want to have to feel this again, this protective, the work that you have to do to say, I love him, I trust him, I know where his heart is, I know there's going to be drinking, and I still know there's no threat to my marriage, right? And there would be people now pulling him in different directions, saying they wanted him to do this for work, or they wanted him to do that, and not knowing, I liked our little nest, and I didn't need it to be big. Yeah. And so had I known Dave, I would have done things differently. I was taken aback by it because I was proud of him. Yeah. I thought his success was great, and look at this book. And gosh, we'd go to book signings, and people would say, do you want to sit? And he'd be like, no, if they're going to stand for me, I'm going to stand for them. Just like, I was so proud of him. He's such a cool guy, and he's a great father. So what was it that was making me, like, one time, and this is a painful moment for me, he said, hey, I did an interview. Do you want to see it? And I said, yeah, no, I will. Probably not right now. And I know what I was feeling was threatened.
Yeah.
I know that now, but I look back and I go, having been on a few interviews myself and not knowing how you'll appear and if it goes well or not, it would be nice to say,
he's looking for you for validation. Right?
hey, babe, how do you think this went?
Maybe a little ego stroke. We like our ego strokes a little
right?
bit.
Like, and why not? Why not say you did such a great? And now I went with him on all the TV stuff, and I'd always be like, you did such a good job. And but there was something about that moment that I go, what a vulnerable thing for him to do.
Yeah.
As a humble person, to invite me to watch something.
Yeah.
And it's probably small in the big scheme of things, and maybe it was to him, but it's big to me because I feel like I missed it.
Yeah. It is interesting how you talk about that, the book and the, again, the fame around, who he is and what he accomplished being that sort of new thing, right? Because back to, there's this amazing documentary about Nolan Ryan and his life, but his wife is really what it's about, and she's amazing. If you haven't seen it. I mean, I encourage anybody to go watch it. But she said, I didn't know I was going to have to share him with the world.
Yeah.
And first it was the teams, right? That world. And then it was the world, because again, you said this once, and I wrote down the quote, that a life, you didn't know you signed up for a life that the volume was going to be turned all the way up.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden you have all these people that, again, they know him for what he did or does, not who he really is.
Yes.
And you're trying to support him in the best way you know how, but of course it's going to bring up insecurities, right? And you're going to go, and again, there's financial positivity in the sense of like what he's doing in these speaking gigs, and it's good for your family. I mean, I've dealt with this with my wife, and going out and being the person on display, and then also being tired afterwards. And like, she doesn't always know the right thing to say or the right thing to do. Is it, do I ask about how the podcast went today? Or is it, hey, honey, can I get you a plate of food? And I couldn't tell you necessarily what's right or wrong either. And so like, that's the dynamic of a marriage and a relationship, that when you are allowing the public to define how they know you or how they think they know you, it can be a trap. It could be this identity crisis, maybe not always internally, but definitely when, again, I have to stay relevant or, they need me to just do this thing. And pretty soon you realize like, man, if everything didn't happen this way, they wouldn't be here.
Yeah. It is interesting. And I mean, kind of interestingly too, Chris wanted to give away all the money for the book. And so we weren't financially doing good. He didn't have speaking gigs that paid, he was in a company that was struggling and that he thought didn't have any money. Turns out it did, but it's all part of the craziness. But he, before he died, he did sit down with a financial advisor, because we were like, okay, we want to give money away. And so how do we do that? There's a lifetime limit of giving. We never knew about that, And so we were investigating all of that stuff. And he said, we want to give it to a number of families. So while we were sitting there doing that, the financial advisor said, Chris said, if I die, and I was like, no, you're not going to die. Like, this was 2 weeks before he was killed. And he said, Taya, and he kind of went like that, which he never did to me. He went, hold on. And he said to the financial advisor, he said, if something is to happen to me, my family's now the family of the fallen, and they get everything. And I was like, no. I said, I agree with you. I said we'd give it away. And he was like, Taya. And then the guy pulls out a legal pad and starts writing. I go, what are you doing? He said, you just never know. It's better to have it in writing.
Well, and again, the type of father Chris was, I mean, of course he's going to support his kids and foster the great, what I mean, whether he's here or not.
Right, exactly. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? And the two people that we wanted to originally, one of them, I just absolutely love her, and she's a family, and, a daughter that we wanted to do. So she was like, I don't need it. And, and somebody else, the response was not what Chris thought when he originally wanted to give it. And so he was like, this isn't working either. So let's just start like a foundation or something, or find a way. And then if something happened to him, this. And I feel good about, I feel like I've still carried that legacy of not trying to keep it all, to give back.
I think you've been a great steward of,
I mean, I feel like I have. I mean, and it's not to pat myself on the back. It's like, it is a part of you, right? Giving becomes a part of you. I know you have that in your spirit, like you want to give. And I think, but going back to what you were saying about having this new, like this fame, Chris had, it reminded me, I was looking at you with your beard, and Chris asked the kids and I, do you guys like me with a beard or not? Because he'd never had a beard before American Sniper. And we were like, oh, I think I like it. You know, the kids were like, we like it, Dad. And he's like, all right. And he said, you know what I like about this is when the fuss is over with the book, I can just shave it and no one will recognize me. And I was like, wow, who thinks that way, you know? And little did he know it would be such a successful book. And
did you have any premonitions? Or you mentioned even just the hand gesture in that conversation with the financial advisor. Do you think he had some premonitions? Not necessarily like how or when it would occur, but like
I do think he did.
You did.
I do. And not exactly what you said. I don't think he knew how or what, but he thought about getting a truck that was a little less conspicuous. He had a big black truck, and he had dreamed about having this truck, right? But then I think he just didn't want to stand out as much, and so he's thinking about that.
Perception is reality. I mean, you've dealt with this now, post Chris's death and all of the just spotlight.
Yes. I mean, he used to get on a plane and do this so people wouldn't recognize him, you know? Yeah. And he was so kind and gracious to people when they did, but if he could go unnoticed, he would, right? And so then SHOT Show, January of 2013, McKenna, who's such a sweetheart, and, you know, she was like, we used to joke, like, if we all had a string and you pulled it, you know, what would we say? And Chris's was, I'm sorry, Bubba, I wasn't trying to hurt you, because they'd always play rough, you know? And McKenna's was, I love my whole family, you know? And Colton's was something like, give me a math problem or give me a riddle or something, you know, challenging. And but anyway, so McKenna said with tears in her eyes, she said, I know Daddy's gonna be right back in a couple of days, but I just miss him when he's gone. And her eyes filled with tears, and I thought, oh, that's so sweet. And I said, you're right, he's gonna be back, you know. So Chris calls that night, and I said, the sweetest thing, you know, McKenna said this. Well, I didn't know it, but the friend that was with him at the time, he got real quiet, and I said, are you okay? He said, I just feel like someone kicked me in the gut. And I said, really? Oh my God, I'm sorry. I was trying to say, like, it's so sweet. She loves you so much. They were so close. He grabbed the bridge of his nose and went from standing to squatting, and his eyes filled with tears, hearing that, right? Then, like, I think a week before he died, we were with his brother's wife was having their baby. And so, you know, we went down there with the family and hanging out, doing all this stuff. And we were at dinner later, and his niece was like 2.5 or 3, I think. And she was having a little bit of a meltdown because, you know, new baby and lots of people and stimulation, all that. And he put his hand on my knee and he said, I wish I'd have been around more for this. And I said, for that age. And I said, babe, you were. And he goes, no, you know what I mean. Yeah. And I said, no, I do know what you mean. And I think I really feel like you were. And so as we talked about it, I said, you know what? It sounds like you're wanting the long term now. Like you're wanting the long game. You want to be the grandpa and all that. And instead of like dying on the battlefield as being the glory. Yeah. And he goes, I really do. I really do want that. And it was kind of a solemn thing. And I just wonder, right? Yeah. If something, because I think your spirit knows something, but you don't know what you know or don't know. Yeah. But it felt like everything was kind of coming full circle. Like God gave us this, like, I mean, I was on the phone with a friend in January saying, this is so stupid. I'm crying, but it's because I feel like something bad's about to happen to one of us because things are so good right now. It's like this warm blanket around us of like everything we had tried so hard to get to click was. Yeah. And I felt like it shouldn't have happened that fast. Like he had just gotten out of the military and we went through all this hardship in that first year of him trying to figure it out and, trauma and post-traumatic stress and working out and the kids and adjusting to life and moving to Dallas. And it was like, I told him, I said, I'm so glad I did get the chance to do this, but like, I'm so proud of you. Like, who does this? Who comes out of all of that and is you the way you are now? Like, just, it kind of went back to that thing of when I first met him, like, who are you that you're this?
Yeah, just in awe.
Yeah, like, you're so good. And that was a great January. I mean,
and he was serving, right? Helping guys, which I know ultimately led to, everything that went down with him and Chad. For you that day, even, like you're a very intuitive, tapped in, human being. Yeah. Was there some hairs sticking up? Was there some oddness, offness?
So our kids had a basketball game and so we went there, and then my son was going to go home with one of his friends, and my daughter and her little girlfriend were going to take to Build-A-Bear, and Chris was going to go take this guy. And we had talked about it, and he said, I just want to give him a drive. Shoulder to shoulder time is really good to talk about stress. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, Dave, the guy who killed him, according to his own psychiatrist, prosecution and defense said he did not have PTS. He never saw combat, right? Never had trauma.
Yep.
So
key, very key.
Very key.
As they tried to plead insanity and
all the
PTSD.
things, right? And get away with everything. And there are people, sadly, that do that.
Yep.
And so I said, are you feeling okay? And he said, yeah, I just really don't want to go do this today. And I had been working on in our marriage, letting him lead sounds not the way I want it to, but really saying, you lead our family, right? If you want my opinion, I'll give it, but otherwise I trust you, just lead. And it was working really well for us. And there was sometimes in the past, I might have said like, well, if you don't want to go, don't go, right? But he said, he goes, yeah, no, Chad's on his way over, and I told the guy I'd do it, so I'm going to do it. We're going to drive down there, and then we'll be back. It won't take very long. It's okay. And I said, you invited Chad? And he said, yeah, I kind of thought it'd be good to have another set of eyes. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, something wasn't quite right. And I said, you're okay? He says, yeah, I just want to get it over with, you know? And so because he gave the guy his word, now I could go back and say, and I already knew this from other widows, like you can't, the day we're going to die is the day we're going to die. Yep. If I had tried to talk him out of it, I think there's a bigger possibility that he would have been frustrated and said, I'm going. And then I would have had to end on that note. Whereas I got to end with like the kiss and the I love yous and the hug. And I said, okay, well, you know, we'll see you soon. And I talked to him once when he was at the range, and I could definitely tell something was off. Yeah. They were checking in, and he just did not, he sounded super irritated, did not want to be there.
Well, I remember he was texting Chad, like, hey, this guy's nuts. Yeah. Right? Like, something's like, hey, like, have my back off. Or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Watch my six or something. But still, I know there's no way he would have thought that the guy would shoot him.
No.
Like, there's no way. He wouldn't have gone to a place with guns if he thought that was the possibility. You know, he just thought, this guy's a little off. Like, let's just keep an eye on him. But not off like he's going to do something with a gun. That did not occur to him. And Chris was shooting an Old West pistol. I mean, he wasn't shooting, like, long tactical. Gun, no, he was just enjoying a beautiful day in Glen Rose. And
question.
Yeah.
This may be a hard one.
Yeah.
If you could go back to that day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As he's walking out the door, you could say anything to yourself, right? That version of Taya prior to all of this coming down on you.
Yeah.
Would you say anything? What would you say? Would there,
I wouldn't say anything, because if I had told her something's going to happen to him, like, she would have just like held on to his ankles, you know what I mean? Like, of course, on the ground, like holding. And as it was like, okay, we got to see our favorite people, our kids, play a basketball game, and at this little church, you know, it was just, you know, our kids were going off to do something fun, and it was, I love you, and we'll see you. We're going to go out to dinner with our friends that night for one of their birthdays. And I don't think I could say anything, because if I was, you know, if I said, hey, there's nothing we left unsaid, which I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. And I don't think he ever doubted my love and commitment, which in the beginning, I think he did. And I think we got through that, and he really understood I'm really not going anywhere. Yeah. And so, I don't think there's anything. Yeah.
I know he just had a birthday.
Yeah.
Him and I are birthday buddies.
Yes,
April
that's so
8th.
cool. April 8th. What a great birthday.
Do you celebrate his birthday in so many ways, or any special ways with the kids? And
so in the early years, I had this thought of, I don't want to make a day more painful, because a lot of our days are painful, you know?
Of course.
And so I would ask them, like, you know, Mom, are you okay? Yeah, you know what? It's actually Dad's birthday today, and I was just thinking about him, and I miss him. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And do you want me to tell you when it's coming up? Because, you know, they were 7 or 8 at the time, and no, I think I'm okay, you know, versus now, the Sunday before his birthday, I called my daughter, and I said, are you okay? You know, she's at college, and she said, I'm just having a rough day. She's like, I really miss Dad. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, his birthday's coming up, and her birthday's right after his. And she said, I cried myself to sleep last night, and it's good for her to feel, because for a long time, her coping mechanism was, you know, to escape. Yep. And so I think that made it a little bit more difficult. And like, Colton's getting married, and McKenna was really sad that Chris wasn't here for when he proposed.
Sure.
And Colton said, I think I'm feeling okay about it. Like, I know where he is. And
he's smiling, for sure.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then thinking about him never getting to meet Carrie, his fiance, made him cry,
Of course.
And so I'm like, there's no...
It doesn't stop.
It doesn't, right? Because at different times in your life, you miss him differently.
Yeah. Yeah. We all want these destination points. We're like,
yes.
I'm good.
Oh, I wanted that so bad, Dave. I used to be like, in 5 years, in 5 more years. And I would say, like, I think I'm really good now.
Yeah.
And now I realize that's just ridiculous. Because you are so much better than you were.
Of course, but
there's something that you carry. And there's a brokenness that is, there's such an injustice to it.
Yeah.
And, you and I have talked about generational trauma, and I work really, I want to say hard, but it's not like working hard. It's like my soul is invested in having my kids come out of this in a way that they're cracked and whole, right? So like, and
it's almost like that kintsugi, the Japanese
I love
art,
kintsugi
right?
art, yes.
When a household bowl or product is broken, instead of it being trash, it's glued back together, but the cracks are filled with gold.
Gold.
Right now it's more worthy because it has more of a story. How old were they when Chris was born?
7 and 8.
7 and 8.
So Colton was 8, McKenna was just a couple months shy of 7.
So Colton's 20
Yeah,
now,
he'll be 21 in September, and McKenna's 19.
Just turned 19.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's wild. And
it's interesting to think about the generational trauma too. Sorry to interject. And think about, again, like trauma, seeing somebody get hit by a car, right?
Yep.
Trauma.
Yep.
But like having that person, not seeing it, but having that person be your mom or dad or X, Y, and Z, like that's a trauma that is then inherited based around, again, they didn't directly experience it, but then it occurs, and therefore the body goes into the nervous system, right, creates a pattern to protect itself.
Yeah.
And, again, the stages of grief always show up different, and they always show up unique to you.
Yes.
And oftentimes it finds sort of that pain body, or almost like water finding the path of least resistance to anchor itself in. Yeah. So where have you seen, and I know you guys as a family have done all kinds of work, and I got to compliment you. Like,
thank you.
You were, in the time I've known you, you're not the mom that's like, I'm going to go figure my stuff out. Like, let some professional just work with them, right? Like, you've been like, no, we as a unit are a collective together, and we're going to cry, we're going to scream, we're going to misunderstanding each other. We're going to have, I know you sought professional help and otherwise, but how have you seen that trauma within them, and even healing from that has made you maybe the most proud of them today?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I'm so proud of them because their wisdom and their grace for each other and for me, and learning to have the grace for themselves is extraordinary. Like, their understanding of the world and the pain. And it's not, I say this, it's not just the loss of Chris and Chad, as if that's not enough, right? That would be enough to wreck anybody. But we lost relationships with other family members that were painful in the process, that I had to grieve. And then another family member, which, that we trusted and took a lot from us. And these were over the period of a decade. And then people that we thought were friends that did things, or a security person that we think we trust that steals. And it's like, how many times and how many different losses can one family, but the thing is, Dave, I never saw us as special. So I never saw myself as a target. So I was like, hey, like you talk about being the golden retriever, golden lab, like everybody's my friend. That's how I was. Hey, come in. We're nobody special. We're just us. And I didn't have my guard up against people wanting to take from us. And I feel bad about that because my kids then saw the aftermath of you can't trust people in their foundational years, not even family, to not hurt you, speak out against you, lie.
I'm sure that at some level jades them a bit.
Anxious attachment type of things, all that kind of stuff. Well, so McKenna the other day, and I asked her permission if I could share this with you, but we were just at an Easter egg hunt and with little kids and family friends, and it was just really fun and such a relaxed day. And she used to just detach. She detached from herself, from the world, everything. But we left, and she said, Mom, I feel sad. And I was like, I'm glad you can say that, And she said, I think it's a problem. And I said, okay. And she said, because I see those little kids having fun, and I feel tremendous sadness. And I said, about? And she was like, I used to have that, and then it was cut short, and I can't go back to my childhood and get it back. And I'm scared to have kids because what happens if I have them and I feel the same way, which is their joy. I feel sad, and we were able to talk about that a little bit. And I talked with our trusted friend who's been a therapist to all of us at some point with all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, she does talking, but she does EMDR and she does, tuning forks and she does color therapy, But she said, and the other part of kids sometimes with that will say, I don't want to leave my kids the way I was left.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I've struggled with addiction and I've been fearful that trait is in them.
Right.
A friend of mine was like, you're not God, dude. You're not supposed to be worried about that, right?
Yeah.
And I think too, really quickly, one of the things about this whole Life After podcast is about hearing tools and ways that y'all made it through, and to compliment McKenna and her level of maturity to speak to, I feel sad. I'm connecting the dots, thinking about my future kids, right? Because I mean, I've had times where I'm playing with my kids and I'm there, but I'm not there. And it's like in my head, I'm going, this should make me feel joy, but I'm not connected with it, right?
Yes.
And I think that, again, to hear this story, hopefully those that have endured some tragic loss or serious trauma, they can recognize that the beginning of healing starts with feeling.
Yes. Yes. And it can be scary, right?
Course.
Because we all want to escape that. It does begin with healing. And there is a part, internal family systems is a hugely beneficial therapy that I've done with I've even been able to help other people with it, right?
Cool.
But something happens to you and there's a part of you that every time will rise up to protect you so you won't feel that pain again. But you're not aware that part develops, right? And so it's like a root inside of you that would say, so McKenna's was detach, mine was get busy, distract yourself, right? And so we have to go back and access those parts, and you do it through a visualization and talk to that part and say, I have information now that you might not have had then. How do you feel about me?
It's like an upgrade, like your software update on your computer or on your phone, right?
Right. Yeah. But you can't kill those parts off. And that's what we try to do.
Of course.
Is we try to go, I hate that part of myself.
Yeah. Cut this, box that up.
Right. And so I was like, McKenna, what a victory for you to be able to say that you're sad. And I don't know that I have the answers for this, but Lana does. Lana's, a person. But also just it is a victory to be able to connect that. And then we'll get there. And there are so many things in my family that I've noticed generations before that have blessed me. And then some things that we've carried through that I've wanted to break. It doesn't happen anymore. But you have to get to the root of it. Yep. And some of mine was, some of our family stuff was two things actually I think are interesting. So my grandfather, his mother, so you imagine, long time ago, right? Yeah. And she was married and her husband took her to the abortion clinic twice to abort my grandfather. And she ran out the back door. And he left her then because she didn't want to get rid of the baby and he didn't want kids apparently. And so my grandfather is born and he's raised by a single mom, and he goes and he's an orthodontic surgeon. He's a pilot in the Navy. He has a sailboat. He's by all means successful. He's got 3 daughters. And so he goes to his father who lives in Illinois. He was in Southern California, and says I'm your son. This guy's gonna be so proud, right? Yeah. And he said, I didn't want a son then and I don't want one now. Closes the door, right? Gut punch. Oh. So my grandfather, he's gonna want a son. He's going to want to change it with his son, but he doesn't get a son with the first 3. They're all girls, right? He has an affair. He leaves. He goes with this other woman. They have a daughter, and then they have the son, okay? But all of the women in my family carry something about, I'm going to be like a man, right? Yep. And I don't think any of them know it, but I grew up like a tomboy, remember? My mom was like, let's go get him, right? And in my grief and working through this, I realized, and I knew this, but I didn't want to admit it because I was ashamed of it, that when I found out I was pregnant with McKenna, I cried because I was scared to have a girl, right? I didn't know how to do it because I knew it wasn't.
Ingrained in you as a result of that you weren't enough.
Yeah, I never could figure it out exactly with my mom. I love my mom, but something didn't, we never could figure something out, right? And I didn't want to not figure it out with my baby, And I've talked to McKenna about it, and we've which was also, I felt courageous of me to say, because I don't want her to think I didn't want you. Yeah. But what I'm learning about healing is you have to be very vulnerable and vocal. So you may not have the right words at first, but you have to keep trying to find them, and people will give you grace. So I was telling her, I'm telling you this because I realized a part of me didn't want to connect with you. Yep. And then I was mad at myself
Yep.
And so then Landon talked to me about Ho'oponopono. Do you know this? Okay. Right. So I had to go to my younger self and be like, thank you for having her and for trying to love her. You know, I'm sorry for hating you, and please forgive me for hating that part of myself, and like, you know, ask for the forgiveness. And so this beautiful thing happens where then all of a sudden I'm connecting with her differently. And I'm like, oh, I was able to vocalize and put that aside. And she knows it. She goes, Mama, I've never felt that way and whatever. And I'm like, but I did. Right. And
But you
I
had to
knew
put it in
something
the
was
light
off. Yeah,
for
put it in the light.
to lessen its grip on you.
Right. And I knew that I could do better, and I have done better, and we have connected more.
Yep.
And I mean, God, she's one of my, I know you're not supposed to be best friends with your kids. I get it. But like, they're 19 and 20 and they're like 40-year-olds.
No, at this point,
like,
that's
yeah,
beautiful.
I'm like, whatever, it's beautiful. She's one of
Yeah.
my favorite people. We laugh. But you know, I wonder a little bit about that scared to have kids.
Yeah.
Is there more work we need to do to break that generational curse too of she knew that I had some difficulty connecting, and she doesn't want that. Plus she doesn't want, what if a spouse dies, and what if all this other stuff? But she's talking about it. And like you said, that's the biggest part for people who are hurting.
Yeah.
And to, like, I used to say, I don't want to go into this dark place of pain, because what if I'm in the ditch and I can't get out?
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I had a friend that said, Taya, you can go in the ditch. We're not going to leave you there. And I was like, oh, that's powerful.
Beautiful.
Right? That's what you do with all the guys at ATF too. Like, you're just,
to.
I mean, you're like, you're not in the ditch alone. You can go there, and we're all here to pull you out.
It's fascinating to me. This quote comes to mind that you know, things fall apart for these new things to come together, and it's not for us to say whether one is better or worse, because in our little pinhole of human understanding, we judge everything as good or bad, right and wrong. And ultimately, you know, the man upstairs gets to define what is, and it's all beautiful because it's all his creation. But I think about trauma and people. I think often people. Well, you know, the things that happen to me, like, got a lot of work to do. And that very well may be true.
Yeah.
But the work never ends.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this idea of, like, I've arrived. Like, mental health is not a linear destination, right? It is, like, you know, like, all, like, my Uber map is just all over the place, you know? And so I think about that because the play is never over either. Yeah. Right? Like, if we can create, I mean, I think about this with my kids, you know, if I try and, like, there's monsters in the closet, you know, and you're like, there's no monsters in there. And you close the door, like, there's monsters in the closet. If I go to them, I'm like, hey, look, these are the nice monsters, right? Like, there's a little chubby one. She introduces herself to the monsters, and we invite them to walk out. We say goodnight, right? Go back in. You know, she's a problem is then we have to walk the monsters out every night, right? Because you know, dad thinks that I won. But I think about that, putting it in terms, kids are really good at this. You know, because there's this, you know, mental elasticity, plasticity, and this ability to have imagination. And the older we get, I feel like we get so finite and or put God in a box to predict outcomes, even if they're painful, because it feels like what we deserve. Or all I know is that. And so naturally I'm selecting that. It's like the woman in the abusive relationship that goes from the next abusive relationship because it's all she knows. Right. So I think it's just a beautiful picture of what you're doing and have done both for yourself and your kids. And I also know you guys have a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah, it's both. I think it has to be. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that where do you look for, you know, through your passions today and even things that include the kids where, you know, I want to just have them make it light, like have a little bit of fun.
So honestly, we play board games. I mean, it's just like, it's old school and it's fun and we laugh and we play the silly
I know
ones.
you're competitive, so I'm sure you laugh, but like it's more of a poker face.
Trash talk a little bit. Yeah. Although I've kind of culled back the trash talking because it makes McKenna a little uncomfortable. She doesn't like a lot of conflict at the table. And like, she won a game against her brother the other day, and you know, Colton's very good at strategic games. And I said, you won? I said, did you trash talk him? And she was like, no. I said, you just won and left it at that? And she was like, yeah, I mean, I just won. And it was like, and I'm like, oh, you're missing the whole point.
That's actually the ultimate flex, though, because then he just has to sit into the silence and like. Oh,
he's a very good sport. I will say that, which I love. I'm very proud of that too. But I grew up where it was like major trash talking in the house. So I've pulled it back a little bit, and now it's just kind of fun. But I was thinking there was something else we were talking about with generation. Fear. So my grandfather probably, that I was telling you about, he probably had a fear of losing because he didn't have the relationship he wanted, right? And so how does that get passed down? So he had high anxiety about everything, and he would praise my mom for seeing the problem in everything, right? And then he would say, like, I would never forgive myself if something happened to you and I didn't tell you about it. And my mom adopted that. So, and I'd be like, it's not fair though, because now you're putting fear on me as a kid. It doesn't feel like love to me, or like I'm going to worry you home, you know, worry till you get here. So there was like this pattern, and I thought, I'm not going to do this with my kids. We are not going to live in fear. And we know that bad things can happen and they're unpredictable. And so like, I remember there was a time where Colton was going on a hunt, and he was young, and I was always with him when he went hunting, and, you know, gun safety is big at our house, always was with Chris. And he was going with a group of men and young boys. So it was a father-son trip, but obviously he didn't have a father there, and he didn't have a surrogate father there. He had other men who would be nice to him. And I said, okay. And I was like very uncomfortable with the whole thing, not in a way that felt spiritual, but in a way that felt, I'm having anxiety because of what happened to Chris, and I'm having anxiety because the reality, it's guns, you know?
No question.
And so I remember but I wanted him to have the experience, and I didn't have like a Holy Spirit, stop this now feeling, you know? And so I just hugged him and I cried and I said, I'm struggling. I'm struggling this time. I'm having fear that I don't want to have. And I believe you're going to be okay. And I'm asking you, I'm begging you, like, pay close attention. And I trusted him because I'd watched him hunt and I knew he knew what he was doing. But I was putting him on a plane by himself to go do all this stuff and around guns, right? And so I think the part of this is like owning it and saying, I'm struggling with this, but this is mine. I'm not putting this on you. I am going to ask you to be extra careful, as I always should when you're around. And he understood. And I said, I might struggle a little bit even at the airport, but it's mine. And I know where it comes from. And so I want to encourage people that as parents, we really can pray, God, mend this part of them that I don't know how to mend. And he's more than happy to do it. And I don't think he's holding out. I think it's more like he's connecting with you on something you care about.
Right?
Yeah, it's surrender. And he's saying, like, I see your care and I care because you care about that too. And
that's a loving God.
I found, it's such a loving God. And it's such a powerful thing as a parent to go, I am not responsible for everything. I can't be, because I don't know everything about this child. And but I can pray for them. And I think the prayers of a parent have more power than the prayers of others. And I didn't think that was true, but I have other experiences that kind of led me to that.
I fully think that's true. My mom every morning writes down what she prays for me for. Every year on my birthday. Shout out to Debbie Vobora. I know you're watching. My mom's Life After podcast, biggest fan. But she writes down everything she prays, and then every year on my birthday, I get a letter, the year in rewind. So I'm 39 now. I probably have, I'll bet you I have at least 20, 25 years.
Wow.
And what's crazy is to look at the inventory of when you thought God wasn't answering the prayers, then he answered them in the proper time. I mean, I get goosebumps right now just thinking about that, because again, it's that as humans, we're so amnesic, you know, and that could be a good thing in some senses, you know, but usually it's the good things that we're amnesic about, you know, so I think, the power of prayer, especially as it pertains to what you said, which isn't, you know, God, make my kid obey me. That isn't it at all. It's like, hey, make me the conduit to point to the fact that, like, you created this little individual, you know, and you're not raising kids, you're raising adults, you know, for the sake of putting them out. You've written 2 wildly successful books, American Wife, American Spirit. Thinking about the context of just America specifically today, not the whole world, but just America in this sense. What does America need to hear, right, from somebody who is a deep, deep patriot, somebody that loves their country and wants to serve not just, you know, the military spouses and heroes, but also just her greater community? You know, what does America need to hear today more than ever before? Okay, that's a great question. I think I'm going to pull a line that I saw from The Chosen, and I think in the movie, it was like season 2, episode 8. We do it for a Bible study we watch and talk. And Matthew says something like, isn't that a little harsh, about Jesus saying, like, if you even have a lustful thought, gouge your eye out, you know? And he's like, wouldn't the whole world be blind and whatever? And he said, I'm creating a revolution. This is revolutionary. And I was like, ooh, if we all thought of ourselves as revolutionary, I think that could also heal America, because the problem, I believe, is that we get in this societal, cultural tornado of people who
we don't even know they're aware of what they're trying to do and creating an environment for us that's divisive, that's fear-based, that looks to the government to be a parent and take care of everybody. So we don't have to take care of our brother because, the government's taking care of it, which never works, in my opinion. I'm sure, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there are cases where it works, but generally speaking, the bureaucracy makes it all a crap show by the end.
Pretty short-sighted.
Yeah, pretty short-sighted. And they all came from good intentions, by the way.
Sure.
And I will say this, I do believe that the devil, I never used to believe in the devil, but I believe the devil starts every lie with a truth. He starts you in with a truth and then gives you the lie that follows. So do you
know what Lucifer means?
No.
Light bender. It takes truth and disillusions it to create the illusion of truth, but really to pull you toward a lie, which is the distraction from the truth and the one true.
Beautiful. I love that. Actually, I'm going to send you an Instagram after this too that talks about our seasons and stuff that I think you'll love. But it kind of goes to that essence of somebody creates something that we follow. It was actually about like spring should have been the first part of the year, and we burst out, and then summer we're at our full bloom and our full heat, and then we're supposed to go into fall and relax, and then December start, but we've turned that around when we changed the calendar so that we think January, when we're time of restoration, is when you start. You think summer, when you should be at your full capacity, is the time you lounge and relax and have a drink and sit by the pool.
Yeah.
It really is fascinating.
And it's probably ultimately to sell something, right? To monopolize humans and create power. Yeah.
I think it was created, this is, Instagram, but they said by a pope who wanted to change things for taxation and other reasons, right? Changed the start of the year from April to January. And they said that's why they called them April Fools, because the fools wanted to still think of April as the beginning of the year, and they were sticking to it. I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the concept anyway.
I love it too,
yeah. So, but this concept of revolutionary, right? If you want to be your best, you have to, I think, go against some of culture. You can't be constantly distracted. You can't be thinking that likes and followers are what is your worth. You have to, like, I remember one time Colton was playing football, and he was a young guy, and it was the first time they were starting to do tackle, so it was getting into the bigger, and the coach was having practice on Sundays. And I was like, oh crap, right? Like, we wanted to have like Sunday be a Sabbath, and this was football, and Colton at the time was thinking he wanted to be a football player, professionally, and even though he was young. And I said, I'm really struggling, Colton. Like, I believe if your dad was here and he said, we're not practicing on Sundays, the coach would be like, cool, man, I actually think that's a great idea. We won't do it. But as a mom, I'm going to come across like the wimpy mom who's babying her son and doesn't, And I said, but I just listened to this sermon that said that a day of rest is one of the top 10 commandments, like a day of rest. So Colton goes, well, I think if that's what God says, that's what we do. And I said, are you willing to risk not playing for, this guy? And he said, yeah, I am.
Wow.
And I was like, who are you? I was like, okay. So we texted the coach and I said, listen, I just want you to know it's really important to us. We'll be at every practice. We'll be early for every practice, every game.
He's committed.
Yeah. It's just Sundays. As a family, we're just not going to do it. And the cool thing is, he said, you know what, I understand that. It was just the only day that most parents weren't working or committed to other sports, but we'll change it.
Wow.
And so I was like, man, that's so cool. So revolutionary, right? Like, are you willing to stand on what you believe, not in a way to judge others, not in a way to tear other people down, not in a way it's because you're right. Are you, like, revolutionary to me is being kind to the people that hate you, right? Revolutionary is not getting baited into a fight on social media. Revolutionary is saying, I have my faith and I don't hate you if you don't have the same one. Right?
It's Jesus being struck and not striking back. He turned the other cheek. I used to think of that as he knew no sin. And there is that part in simplicity. But what I recognize that as today is that was against this meat suit. That wasn't against him or his father. So he didn't need to. He could have compassion and unconditional love for somebody that, again, rightfully so, you lay hands on me, right? I'm going to lash back. And yet it was like, no. You sinned against the God in heaven, right? And that's what you're doing right now. It's really your stuff.
Or like, let's say, that's a beautiful example. And the simple things, let's say you want to eat healthily and people are like, it's just fast food, get off it. It's not, whatever. Anything we're doing that's counterculture requires you to be revolutionary, to say we don't want as much government. We want less, which I think is a good solution to start with, right? Or we want healthier food or whatever it is, revolutionary. I think that's what heals us.
I think everything that we're talking about is pertinent for America and just the world. Back to what you said, like if if you care about this chair, don't expect somebody else to take care of it.
Yeah.
Right. Like take ownership of, and again, start where you are with what you have. Right. We were talking in the kitchen earlier, and I used the line that, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. I mean, that's my story. I never met an amputee. I was bold enough, whatever came over me, to go, hey, do without arms and legs. Do you want to work out with me?
Yeah, it's so bold.
But that's also this, like, again, like, I know that was an anointing. That was a gift that was sent. And then the action back to, pursuit of it. And the ability to not just make it where, again, you come in for a week and it's this awesome thing, and then they go back to the couch.
Yes.
Like, we do 9-10 weeks with these people where life's going to happen. They're going to get sick. Someone in their family may pass. They're going to get hurt. Like, and we have to be there in the water, not on the sideline being like, you got it.
Yeah, you got it, buddy.
You're in the water, and sometimes they're dunking you and you're trying not to drown the whole time. But like, when we do pop up, there's so many times where I'll like, smile and they're like, that's a real sick smile. I'm not sure if you're like really liking this in a masochistic way or what, but that's something too that I think is your spirit, is not to shy away from the hard things, to get into the mess with people. I think that free will is about God allowing us to create a mess at times, and therefore increasing our capacity to love, which is, to me, being more like him. And in my opinion, I become more like God or like Christ, not when I'm doing the things right. Not that I'm inherently trying to do them wrong to be all right, God, teach me. No glutton for punishment. But that I think that's something that's interesting to me. It's like, when you start to allow guilt or shame, those lower vibrations, those lower emotions, those lower energies, that's devil's playground.
Yeah, it is.
And most of the people that come to my gym, they're in this apathy or shame or guilt or numb, or they're detached. And I actually need to get them into anger, pride, before I can get them into a willingness or neutrality or, God, for like fear and courage. I love it, because when fear shows up, you're the closest to accessing courage. You're not able to access courage unless fear is real.
Good. I love that.
And so to me, there's a kind of stair step or climbing of the ladder on the emotional sort of resonance, where you have ultimately enlightenment, love, peace at the highest. And I think about people taking ownership, again, I think through prayer, through, hopefully a deepening of their faith that gives them the tools and perspectives where they can see that all this is happening for them. Because again, when there's gratitude, you also can't be fearful. And so I don't know, where today can you speak to gratitude in areas of your life that maybe people can be like, how could she be grateful for that?
Okay, that's such a great topic. By the way, I don't think you know this. I wrote a children's book called Prayers for Bears, and it's Bailey the Grateful Bear.
All right, I'm gonna have to buy that one for my little 4-year-old.
Bailey the Grateful Bear. And it started because on our worst days, where I said, I don't know even how I'm going to afford our house. I could work, but at the time I wasn't. I was a stay-at-home mom, and Chris had just died, and I'm like, I don't know how this is all going to go. And a friend of mine said, Taya, you will always have a roof over your head and food to eat. And I said, that's the problem. I don't even know. And she goes, no. You will always have that, because you have people who love and care about you. You will always have a roof over your head and food to eat. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And so it really boiled down to, I'm grateful for the roof over my head, the food to eat, my hands and my feet. Plenty of people that don't have hands and feet. And I know, we've been fortunate to go to different parts of the world for mission trips. They don't have the food to eat, and they don't have roofs over their head. And so for me, I mean, literally, Dave, I walk around, I'm not even kidding, this is going to sound so corny, but the other morning I got up and I put my feet on the floor, and I literally was like, I am really grateful I have feet. But I don't know. I mean, I say it in my book, and I say those kind of things, but like literally thought that. And it's like when the grass is green, I'm like, thank you, God, for just like the beautiful grass. And I don't want it to sound as cheesy as it might sound, but what I'm saying is I try not to miss a thing that I'm grateful for. And it's not like I'm on some mission to do that. It's literally that I've allowed it in my heart and I've allowed it in my mind and I see it. And so when I'm, am I grateful for the hardships? Because treat your trials and tribulations with great joy. They produce endurance and character. Okay. So if I want to, I used to think that was kind of silly. I'm like, I don't know that we're going to treat them with joy. But at the same time, I'm not afraid of trials and tribulations anymore. I don't dread them. I don't anticipate them. I'm comfortable knowing that they'll come. But I also know that like God's seen us through each one. And it doesn't mean that life goes exactly the way I want. But life was never supposed to be since the fall of man, right? This just perfect, easy ride. And in America, we oftentimes, I think think that, right? Because we want something, I order it from Amazon. It can be here overnight,
Instant. Yep.
And so it's a different thing of, okay, I'm learning something right now and I'm grateful for that. And I have this peace, like if my kids need to learn something, I used to feel like I better teach them now. What if I die? And now I think they're learning at their own pace. They don't always need me to say something. They'll ask if they need it. And I'm grateful for that lesson, right? Yeah. So I don't go back necessarily and say I'm grateful for the hardship. I do focus a lot on, I'm really grateful I learned that. I'm really grateful I'm a different person now than I was then. Right. I'm grateful for the peace that I feel even when things go wrong. And I'll look at other people sometimes and think, oh, I recognize that feeling. I used to have that a lot. Not that that sounds almost like, oh, I've evolved. It's not that. It's like I'm very aware that that could still be me.
Yeah.
And that because of hardship, I have a different perspective. I wish I could have gotten it without the hardship, but I know I wouldn't have. Yeah. Well, I think I wouldn't have.
No, I don't think so. I think that the ability, sometimes it's like that there's that one thing in that person I work with that just gets me. Yeah. Like that's really inference. It's the thing in you, right? That you can't. And so, and I think that's this whole full circle thing, which is, and I'll use the example. Actually, team guy said this to me once. He said, you live as the destructor long enough, you watch yourself become the healer.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that was a beautiful...
Live as the destructor, you become the healer.
Yeah, just idea of like, again, like I had to explore violence at a level to discover the monster, but then that Jordan Peterson like learned how to contain it. Yeah, like it's the person who knows how to use the sword but keeps it sheathed. Yes. It's the most powerful. Like, I love that. Yeah, because that's and I think that Chris, the sheepdog, right? The protector. Yeah. He understood that, anything that he was doing, combat driven to eradicate evil, that there was a weight to that. Yep. I mean, in this life and the next. Yeah. And I think that, ultimately no one, again, back to like gratitude, I'm sure that he was grateful for the opportunity to protect other soldiers. Yep. And yet I bet it was really hard to be grateful for the fact that he was called to be an angel of death. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Was he open with you at times about that dichotomy and that sort of tiptoeing of these two worlds?
Yeah. In fact, I think one of the times that it really broke my heart when, as people, we know him as like the sniper, but he did a lot of hand-to-hand busting in houses, breaching doors, different things like that.
He was teaching the Marines how to clear a house because he was watching them get hurt. Yes. Which is crazy because I have a couple guys who've come through my gym that were part of the units that he was Overwatch for and then came down on the ground. Yeah. Which, awesome. Talk about the relative danger, like not even close. Yeah. Like what he was doing, and that was just because of his personal commitment. He couldn't sit back and watch.
Yes, he couldn't sit back and watch. And I think you and Chris were a lot alike in that way where, even when he was coaching T-ball and the kid that really couldn't throw, he was like, that's my guy, right? Like he'd go down and just be like, hey, buddy, you got this. And, encourage him. And because the truth is the kid can throw, but nobody's ever stopped long enough, right? Just like your guy is, it's revolutionary what you're doing to say like, you have no arms and no legs and I'm going to help you work out, right? Like that takes a different kind of thinker. But I do remember Chris saying if people really knew some of the stuff that I did, they'd think I was a monster. And the numbers that the Navy tells him to say, they're nowhere close. Yeah. And I thought, Chris, but you were in war. Like it's different. And he said, I don't think people understand that. And I'm sure there's a certain segment of the population that doesn't. But I think as a man, you think if somebody's coming into your house to, kill you and kill your daughters, what are you going to do? By any means necessary, right? And great if it can be a clean shot, but what if it's something where it's hand to hand, and their intent to kill you? And so those times my heart would really break for him. And interestingly, in our wedding vows, I will remind you of who you are when you forget. And it was so prophetic because I needed to remind him of who he was and was. And I think I needed him to remind me sometimes too, in different ways. But I think we all need that, the person that sees us. Yeah. And so, he did let me in. And more when he got out, he would share more because he didn't want me to be more afraid. But I'm like, do you know my brain is so imaginative? There's nothing.
I mean, the true story of being on the phone. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
during the craziest firefight and everything going down, like, and you're listening, screaming through the phone. Like, again, that's not Hollywood script. Like,
that happens.
That's real life.
Yeah, it does. It happens. And so
wild.
I think he just thought, I mean, there were times where I thought, Iraq wasn't the only place he went either, right? And there were times I thought he was on a training trip, and I find out later, like, oh my God, really? You know?
Yeah, he just Halo jumped from 30,000 feet
right?
and landed and calls you on a sat phone.
I'm like, I thought you were in El Centro, California. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think, some of that was out of protection, and some of it might have been also for him. I think a lot of the guys that we work with in TAC-F, like you, we work with them for 2 years, 5 or 6 programs.
Which is Taya and Chris Kyle Foundation.
Thank you. Plug, shameless plug. Yeah,
No, by all
TACF.org.
means. Yeah, look them up. And if you are a military, active or retired,
or first responder, any first responder.
100% looking at this foundation, doing incredible work and real programs, not just we touched 10,000 people this year at this level. It's like, no, we're going to get in, we're going to do life together, and we're going to watch you heal and be in lockstep with you.
Yes, and it's free, obviously, to them. But also, I think this is super cool for warriors, and it goes with what you do. We come from the first thing they do is they take a strengths finder exam or test, and then we see, okay, these are your top 5 strengths. That's what we're going to work from. How do we take your strengths and make them Olympic in your marriage, It
always fascinates me in school where it's like, your kid's elite at these things and these things are bad. And so we're going to spend all of our time on these things that I'm like, okay, cool. So she was working on algebra rather than fostering her gift at fill in the blank.
Yes.
Like that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't equate.
No, it doesn't. And it's
That's
hard.
Cool. You guys do it that way.
So we do. Yeah. And then they do small group men's, small group women's, one-on-one with the coach and the couple. And it's all strengths based. So they get a community. Yep. And we do it online, which I was convinced would not be powerful enough, but Baylor University studies our programs and we have like a 99% success rate. Dang. It's crazy. Yeah. So,
that's
right. That's God.
To everything being in alignment.
100%. And it's the people showing up, and it shows they really would do anything. Yeah. They just needed the tools, because the tools for a service marriage are different than a civilian marriage. Yep. Right. And that even the NFL, I remember people used to say to us, like, a lot of the things about getting deployment ready, getting game ready, you get in a different state of mind. Totally. And like you said, anybody would sleep with you and you're away from home and you might go out and celebrate. I mean, it's just,
you have access to anything when you play in the NFL.
Yeah. So there's similarities, and then spouses hear stories of infidelity and then you worry and like, how do you be friends with that guy? And I mean, there's just all of it. So there are a lot of warrior similarities, I think, with your job.
Going back to sort of the military as an institution and thinking about what they do or perhaps don't do is a better way of saying it, to facilitate transition, right? To target mental health, to, again, not just have it be like the guys at the VFW, we're going to drink and the camaraderie is going to fix this. Yeah. Where do you think perhaps the institution can learn from what you guys are doing? Yeah. And maybe also if it's like, hey, maybe it isn't for the giant institution that is the military to do this, but where could we have more in private sector that can step up and have, not just the, few thousand of people, but, the tens of thousands of military and their spouses to be served well in that transition of mental health.
Okay, so what you said was dead on. It cannot be the institution. I'm convinced of that.
I totally agree.
Right? And bless them, they try.
No, the mandates don't work.
No.
Government.
And nobody's, you go there for war.
Yes.
Right? You go somewhere else for healing. It's like you do war well.
Totally.
Right? And then let somebody else, the private sector, do the healing and the building up. Now, you could fund the government, could fund it. And I love that. And then there's also more accountability, less bureaucracy. Yeah. They can be studied like ours are, and I'm sure yours are, to say, like, these are the actual results. These are the testimonies. Make sure they're doing the right thing and then fund them, right? Yep. I think that would be a huge thing. And I do not think that there's the trust, because you don't want to feel like you're a warrior and you're ready to go to battle and they know what you're struggling with. It just doesn't coincide. And they say it, and there are some programs I'm sure that are good, and there are some people trying it. But I think as a general rule, it's not looking at human nature to think that that's possible.
Well, think about, Sebastian Junger's Tribes book, which is a fantastic book, but he talks about those old primitive societies, which again, the warriors, they didn't live inside of the town walls in society. They were on the outskirts, right? They were savages, okay? And guess what? The society depended on them being out there for protection. When those guys wanted food or sex, they came and took it, right? And then they went back outside the walls. And guess what? When the war, the battle was over, they came back, and those that were sort of retiring out,
Yeah.
they'd have a ceremony where they would lay their weapons down with all the civilians there. And the ushering in of that was this ability for them to go, and the civilians just to look at them and go, okay, you no longer need this.
Yeah.
So when we see you go to pick it back up, because it's all you know, we're going to be here to fill that gap.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? I heard something else too that was like, any community over 400 people starts to have like a bureaucracy type thing, right?
That's a cool statistic.
Yeah.
I bet you that's pretty right on.
Right? It starts to be like, then there's a power and greed thing. So like what you're talking about with those tribes, that reminds me of that. There is accountability in a smaller tribe, in a smaller city. The civilians know you. There's not like a parent or a person in charge or committee that's in charge. And when it's one-on-one, eye to eye, we heal differently. We're accountable differently. I'm all for, and I know you are too, building communities. That's one of the things that makes TACF successful, is that we build these communities so you have friends of your marriage that have the same tools you do, because marriage is a long-term game. Healing, staying fit, long-term game. And so if you have that, who do you call when you're like sliding out of it? You want to call somebody who's been there with you and knows the drill. But remember in ATF?
Battle buddy.
Yes, battle buddy. Yeah, that's a great word for it, actually. I might start to use that a little bit, battle buddies.
What's ahead for you? I mean, you could choose to be as busy as you like, and you have. Where do you find yourself today? You've written books, you're speaking all over the world, you lead mission trips. You've grown 2 incredible young adults. Colton's getting married. Like, I mean, for you, like, the programs, the foundation, I know is the heart of where you want to invest your biggest bandwidth. But what can we expect next for Taya Kyle? When does the Taya Kyle podcast get launched?
Dave, I don't know how to do it. I told you, man, I need some leadership there. I mean, we all have our talents. That one, I don't know. It would be fun, but I feel like somebody'd have to help me narrow my focus. I'm passionate about marriages and healing and faith but I don't know. Maybe, who knows? I started to think it's good to have like a 5-year, I hope to, and then just be honest and say, I guess, wherever God leads, right? But wherever God leads sounds a little bit like, okay, well, we're still, come on, Taya, we're still asking, what do you think?
Like, who is that bush light on fire? Then I'll go.
Like, I believe it. But I think, I'm not really sure, Dave, to be honest with you. I have things that, there's a part of me that says, kind of retire and be behind the scenes and do things. There's a part of me, I want to write a novel. I've always wanted to.
Fiction novel.
Like a really deep, profound, generational, all those things.
Like a murder mystery style?
I started with it before Chris died, actually. I started one, and it was a mystery, and it was loosely based on us, and there was a body, and they found it. And he used to read the chapters and be like, oh, I like it, and encourage me or whatever. But I
think we need to bring that thing out of hibernation.
Well, I've actually had a thought too of doing a novel, which, like, I'm not big on revenge, so I won't do it. But I thought, of all the things that have happened, I could write like the revenge book, but I'm not going to do it. I don't want to put that energy out there.
If it's fiction, you're fine.
I know, but still, I don't know. I've got this whole accountability thing that I'm like, what am I putting out in the world? So anyway, I'd love to do a novel, but more than likely, I'm focusing on TACF. Colton and Carrie are getting married. McKenna's in college. I still want to be available to them. I do enjoy, no, you know what? I haven't always loved speaking. That's the truth. But I enjoy the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I love to give back that way.
Is it like you don't strike me as somebody that gets nervous?
I do when I get up there. Yeah. And which is interesting too. I think it's more that every time I go up, it's something vulnerable.
Right.
And so then, like, when I'm done, I just want comfort food.
You're emotionally connected with it, and just like,
yes. And I want to give people what they want to hear, and like everybody there might have different things, so I tend to get a little bit in my head about it. But I'm confusing myself. I think there's a part of me that does really enjoy the opportunity to connect with people and hopefully give something that's helpful. And then there's a part of me that's like sweating down my back because I'm on stage and I hope I'm doing a good enough job for people, Well,
I'm sure there's a dance too, because like, again, Chris and the character and hero and heroics of Chris and otherwise, like, I'm sure that there's often like, they want to know a lot about Chris, just like, this podcast, right? Like, Chris is this big, larger than life man.
So great to know.
And also, like, that's why I wanted to open with like, what makes Taya Taya?
I know.
Like,
that
really,
is
like, because I think that people are so quick to define you through, again, all the reasons we've before mentioned, but it's cool for me to watch you and witness you actually do things that are counterintuitive to what the world is telling you, which is like, Taya, we need to go do this thing or go do that thing, right? And maybe that keeps more relevance and or attention and maybe, through that there's another book or another thing but at the same time, you're not chasing those things because you know who you are and you know who God's called you to be. And on the path that you're on, I do love the 5-year, right?
Yeah.
Like what is a sight line that is a vision for myself that's greater than how I feel today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not saying that I'll only be happy if.
Right. That's it. And I mean, there are, I wonder about the opportunities sometimes, like what is coming next and what, like, to your point, I remember when I wanted to first do my children's book and they were like, well, can't you do it about military kids and this and that? And I remember this was after Chris died, probably 3 or 4 years, and I like hit my hand on the table and I was like, I am not just that though. There's more to me. And now I think I'm more comfortable with it. If that's what people want, that's what they, then that's a part of me. I'll genuinely, authentically give that to them. Sure. But I had a friend of mine and she died of brain cancer, which was absolutely awful. But I remember before she died, after Chris was killed, I just didn't have the energy to be as good a friend, I guess, or as involved with everybody else. So I was trying to survive, and she was out of state, and I was trying to raise my kids who were grieving, and we had the book and the movie, and I mean, it was just chaos, lawsuits, chaos. And so when I went to visit her in Colorado with the kids, and she goes, "You're funny. I forgot you're funny," And I was like, "Thank you. I feel like I am, I have fun." Well, thank you. But I mean, there are parts of me that people aren't going to know. Like we had, it might have been with American Wife. I was like, "Could you get me on like Jimmy Fallon or something fun?"
Yeah.
And they reached out and they were like, "What are we going to do with a widow? Like, this is not fun." And I'm like, I guess that's true, right? I mean, Like, so I have a lot of fun with my people and my friends and whatever. And then if I can give back and do things that are good for the world, that's what I want to do. And I want to support my kids. And
you excited to be a grandma one day? Is
Ah,
that a wild thought?
I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to drop that on you.
No, it's fine. No, I know. It's like I'm getting to that age where like, oh, it could happen in the next. I remember talking to a friend of mine saying, I probably will be in like the next 10 years. That's wild.
That is wild. And awesome.
And awesome and fun. And I try to have, okay, here's the deal. I try to have no expectations of anything because I want my kids to have the freedom to go, be, do.
Yep.
You don't owe me anything.
Yep.
And if I can be around and help, great. I hope and I think, Dave, I'll always have things that I'm interested in pursuing. Like, I don't see myself ever wanting to just like, quote unquote, retire.
No.
Because I have too many things I want to explore,
Yeah.
And so I hope they never feel they need to take care. Like, I want to share life with them, but I don't want them beholden.
I think you're doing a heck of a job. Last question for today. Do you ever watch old clips of Chris, either your own or him on interviews, things as such?
That's a great question, too. You're really good at this. You should have
I've
this
had some time
podcast
to
for a long
prepare.
time. Yeah. Yes, sometimes. I used to be really careful about when I do it because they'd make me cry. Something about I think it's true, too, that there are no two identical voices in the world, like fingerprints.
Yeah.
And so there is something about a voice that goes, oof, The kids and I have watched a little bit of family movies, but not much, because for them it's tender too.
Of course.
And so I do still sometimes, and I find myself having more joy than sadness. But I need to be careful, Dave. I don't know if there is a part of me that's always like broken with respect to him and love, and in a beautiful way, and also in a way that's like, there's something left I probably haven't done for healing. And I don't know where that line is. So I think I just sort of organically, if it comes along, I do.
Yeah.
I don't force it. I don't not. Maybe I should. I don't like, there's still something nebulous, like I'm not really.
And maybe you don't have to overly go into it or try to search and define it. I lied. This is actually the last question.
Okay, good. Let's go.
One day, far in the future,
Yeah.
when you get to heaven
Yep.
and you see Chris.
Yeah. Thought about it so many times. I have this vision that I don't know if it's true or not, but it's from the beginning. I've thought of us. We go to this like grassy hill, and there's like we're like at the top on a bench. It has no back on it. It's like almost like a stone bench. Maybe that's why I have a couple of them in my house. And we just sit, and he's like, and I'll go, do you remember this? Did you see this when they did that? And did you see this? And we'll just like catch up. Where I get to kind of review the life that I wish he could be living with us. And knowing that he was there watching it would be kind of cool. Like, yes, and have him laugh.
What do you think he'll say to that point? Right? Is he going to look at you and be like, he did a hell of a job. I mean,
Oh,
if you
you know
think
what?
about that through that
That's
lens,
interesting. I never thought about it that way. I just thought about it like
he's been watching, right? And will continue to.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to imagine the guy that you spoke about over this entire interview is the type of guy that's going to say something probably funny, honestly.
Yeah, probably funny.
But something that, like, again, like he's been up here or up there, you know?
Yeah.
We're watching you down here and cheering you on and rooting you on. And
that's so true. You know what? That's
angels.
so true. Yeah, actually when I think about that, it hits me in the heart. I think he would be so happy. And I've sometimes thought about, I've actually have thought about this more lately, about how he must have seen me in the beginning, and I believe he already knew where we would end up, and wanting to say, like, you're going to be okay. Like, this is going to suck for a long time, and you're going to be, like, I can already see 10, 15, 20 years, Taya, it's going to be okay. And not being able to, right? Because you can't say that, but what an interesting perspective. And I also see him on the other side, like, just, you know, picking me up and like twirling me around and be like, you're here, you did it. Like, you know, and of course making a joke, like, sometimes we thought you would, you know, weren't going to, or, you know, but I do think about, like, I do feel like I have one foot in heaven and one on earth.
Yeah.
And I probably have I'm fascinated by all parts of it. The near-death experiences. What is heaven like? What does it look like? Yeah. And it's like one of those things that, again, Chris went to a place that I'm not familiar with. Like when he was deployed, he'd go somewhere I couldn't relate to, and he did it again, you know? Yeah. And, but I see him also as having this perfect understanding. I think we all get that when we get there. I used to have this, there was a Kenny Chesney song, and he's talking about a friend who's dying, and he's saying, like, the guy who's dying says, I still got a few songs in this guitar. Play them well, my friend. Or play them good, my friend. Mm-hmm. And I used to think about that, and a song used to just get me, because I'd be like, I'm going to do it, Chris. Like, you got a few songs left in your guitar. I'm going to play them for you. And one of the major ones was The Kids. Yep. And I know he'd be in awe. Mm-hmm. I almost can't imagine him at Colton's wedding, because that takes him out of the 30-something, you know, into this place. Mm-hmm. But I get the very strong sense oftentimes that he's like, dude, those are our kids. Like, those kids are just cool.
Overwhelmed with pride.
Overwhelmed with, like, like, I used to think of him going like, that's mine. Like, that one's mine, you know?
So awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. I could go on probably forever and not make any sense, because it's all like up here with heaven and him. But, and I know there's gonna be other people I can't wait to see, but I'm going to tell you this. Chris was he'd say the most romantic things. I'm like, you should write this down. But one of the times when I was like not very, I was kind of being we were buying a house and I was working, and he was always taken away. And I'm like, I feel like it's all on me. And, you know, I'm stressed. And he said, babe, I said, I was hearing about if we had multiple lives, like, what is that about? And talking to him about that. He said, I don't know, but if we have more than one, I can't wait to live the rest of them with you. And I was like, even at my most difficult, like, I was feeling like I was not on my A game wife-wise. And he said that. And so I have this, like, sense of, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have this sense of great closeness and fondness. Yeah. You know, even though you're not married, I just felt so, like, clicked, you know, with him, that I look forward to it. And honestly, it stops me from wanting anyone else in my life now, which is probably not healthy, but I'm just like, but that was the one. And it wasn't because, like, I've met people and they're like, oh, I'm a hunter, and you think, okay, you're trying to be like what Chris was, because you want me to think that
that's what you want. Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with any of those things.
Of course.
It's like everyone is a unique person in a package that can't be replicated. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, Sarah's like, there's no other Sarah, it's just Sarah. Yep. So I find that part interesting too. And I know we would have had hardships and I could over romanticize, but you asked the question, I'll give a 20-minute, like I said, the stream of consciousness.
It's beautiful. I know that's not an easy question. No matter how much you've thought about, you know, heaven and what it'll be.
I think about it an unhealthy amount, probably. Maybe it's not unhealthy, but
it's beautiful.
You know, that's the other thing too, is like, you got to answer for this stuff that you do here, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think about that too, like, just rest in truth, because I don't know how you can be a believer and not think you're going to have to see and answer to the people at some point. You know what I mean? Like, Jesus and the rest of them. Like,
I can tell you this. I have such awe and respect for you. And thank you for letting us in your home, this beautiful home.
And thank you for coming.
Giant 12-foot polar bear in the
course, doesn't everyone
background,
have
right?
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, just casual stuff. But no, these questions and just your vulnerability and your courage and authenticity.
Thank you.
Taya, thank you.
Well, thank you. You do it well. Thanks.
You're a rock star.